You're checking your phone again. You already know there's nothing new. Still, you look. A quiet hope tightens your chest. Maybe this time they noticed. Maybe this time you mattered. You replay what you sent. Too long, too fast, too available. You tell yourself it was harmless. You tell yourself it was confidence. But something in your body knows better. There's a faint heat behind your eyes. A pressure you don't name. You feel smaller than you did an hour ago. Not because you were rejected, because you waited. Waiting did it. Waiting always does. You didn't lose attention in a dramatic way. No confrontation, no conflict, just silence. And in that silence, something shifted without your permission. You adjusted your tone. You softened your stance. You leaned forward without realizing you were leaning at all. That's the moment most people miss, not the asking, the shrinking that happens before it. You tell yourself you're just being open, just being honest, just being human. But your nervous system knows the truth. You handed over the tempo. You made yourself readable. You revealed need before authority was established. Now you're alert, hyper-aware, scanning for signs that you still exist in their perception. This is not about attention. It's about orientation. Right now, your focus is outside your body. Your emotional balance is contingent. Your sense of value is waiting for permission to stabilize. You didn't notice when control slipped. No one ever does. It feels like sincerity while it's happening. Only later does it feel like exposure. This is where the pattern begins. You were taught that asking is respectful, that clarity earns appreciation, that showing interest proves confidence and emotional maturity. You believed that attention, when requested honestly, would be returned fairly. You believed people reward openness. You believed being good made you safe. So you leaned in, you checked in, you followed up, and what happened was not what you were promised. The more transparent you became, the less weight your presence carried. The more available you were, the more optional you felt. The very behaviors labeled mature quietly stripped you of leverage. No one punished you out of cruelty. No one consciously decided to devalue you. Reality simply responded to signals. Psychology does not care about intention. It cares about structure. When you asked for attention, you communicated imbalance. When you sought reassurance, you revealed dependency. And systems, human or otherwise, always flow toward efficiency, not fairness. You were told effort creates value. But value is assigned before effort ever entered the equation. You were told vulnerability builds connection. But uncontained vulnerability often triggers assessment, not respect. You were told to express needs clearly. But need, when expressed downward in a hierarchy, collapses position. Nature doesn't reward the one who reaches. It orients around the one who holds center. You weren't wrong for believing the myth. You were predictable. And predictability is the opposite of power. The discomfort you feel now isn't betrayal. It's the shock of realizing that moral narratives do not override psychological laws. Systems don't care who deserves attention. They respond to who appears complete without it. That's the lie breaking. Long before social norms softened the language, strategists wrote plainly about this dynamic. Not to be kind, to be accurate. Machiavelli was not warning tyrants. He was describing perception. How power forms in the absence of explanation. How authority stabilizes when dependence disappears. His work survived because it matched reality, not morality. He observed that those who require approval are governed by those who do not. That the visible need for favor invites control, not generosity. That people respond less to virtue than to position. This is why his ideas were labeled dangerous. Not because they were cruel, because they stripped away comforting stories. Modern psychology echoes the same law in different language. Attention flows toward self-contained systems, away from systems signaling instability. A person who can be ignored without reaction is unreadable. Unreadability triggers curiosity. Curiosity restores leverage. This is not manipulation. It is gravity. Objects with mass do not beg to be observed. They bend space around them. Everything else adjusts. The uncomfortable truth is this: attention is never owed. It is always allocated. An allocation follows cues of internal order. Those who request attention announce a deficit. Those who remain centered imply surplus. Machiavelli understood that restraint is not absence. It is compression. Pressure held inward, not leaked outward. Power does not argue for its existence. It does not explain why it should matter. It waits. This is why composure unsettles people more than confrontation. It removes reference points. It denies them the satisfaction of managing your state. Understanding this doesn't make you harsh. It makes you accurate. Reality responds to structure, not wishes. And once you see that, you stop negotiating with illusions. You're tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. Not exhausted from effort, exhausted from monitoring, from watching reactions, from calibrating tone, from wondering if you asked too much or too little. You feel the tension of holding yourself just right, hoping attention will settle the unease. And when it doesn't, you replay everything, silently negotiating with outcomes that already passed. What drains you isn't being unseen. It's trying to be seen without authority. There's a specific frustration here that rarely gets named. The sense that you're doing everything correctly and still being sidelined. That your sincerity is somehow invisible. That calm confidence doesn't seem to register unless you announce it. So you announce it, subtly at first, then more clearly, and each time, the weight drops a little further. This is where confusion turns inward. You start questioning your worth instead of the framework. You assume the problem is effort, timing, expression. It isn't. The lie you've been living under is that attention is granted to those who ask cleanly enough. The truth is harsher and simpler. Attention is a response to self-sufficiency, not as an idea, as a felt signal. You don't need more tactics. You need fewer leaks. What follows will not teach you how to demand attention. It will remove the behaviors that repel it. Once you see this clearly, you'll notice every moment you give away center, every micro-reaction, every unnecessary explanation. That awareness doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels sobering, because you'll realize how often you surrendered position without being asked. There's no way back to unconsciousness after this, only forward into discipline. There are 4 principles, not techniques, not social tricks, not performance. They are shifts in internal economy. Once installed, they change how others orient around you without effort. These are not about getting attention. They are about removing the need that blocks it. Each principle alters how pressure moves through you, how silence lands, how absence speaks. You won't be told to act confident. You'll be shown how confidence emerges when dependency is removed. You won't be told to ignore others. You'll learn how indifference naturally appears when your center is stable. This is not additive knowledge. Nothing is being layered on top of you. What follows is subtractive. It takes away the behaviors that leak authority. Once these principles are embodied, attention becomes incidental. People look because there's nothing to grab onto, nothing to manage, nothing to reassure. That lack creates gravity. Each principle stands alone, but together they form a closed system. A way of being that does not chase recognition, does not correct misinterpretation, does not rush to be understood. You'll notice a pattern as we move through them. Each one removes a reflex you are trained to believe was necessary. And as each reflex disappears, something else replaces it. Stillness, timing, weight. These are irreversible changes. Once you feel the difference in how people respond, you won't want the old version back. The first principle begins where most people panic. In silence. Silence is not empty. It is unclaimed territory. The blunt truth is this: whoever breaks silence first usually does so to relieve pressure, not to lead. Most people treat silence like a problem to solve. They fill it with clarification, with humor, with justification. Every word is an attempt to regain comfort, but pressure reveals hierarchy. The one who can hold it owns the frame. Silence functions like negative space in design. It defines structure by what it withholds. The eye is drawn not to noise, but to contrast. Your old behavior was to speak in order to be acknowledged, to ask if everything was okay, to reinsert yourself into relevance. The new behavior is restraint. You let the moment hang. You do not rescue it. Watch what happens when you do this. Others begin to move. They fill the gap. They offer information you didn't request. Why? Because silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty demands resolution. Those who feel complete do not rush to resolve it. Those who feel pressure reveal themselves. This is discipline, not coldness. You are not withholding to punish. You are allowing reality to speak without interference. Silence removes your fingerprints from the outcome. It prevents you from signaling need. It restores symmetry. When you stop rushing to be seen, your presence becomes heavier. Not louder, heavier. People don't chase what talks too much. They orient toward what doesn't need to. This is the authority of silence. The truth most avoid is simple. Attention follows scarcity the way water follows gravity. Anything abundant is taken for granted. Anything rare is assessed. When your availability is constant, your value becomes predictable. Predictability kills tension. And without tension, nothing pulls. Your old pattern was open access, immediate responses, emotional availability without filtering. You believed this showed reliability. What it showed was absence of cost. In economics, price signals value. In psychology, restraint does the same. The new behavior is selective presence, not disappearance. Calibration. You do not rush to respond. You do not fill every gap. You do not announce your availability. You let your attention be earned through engagement, not requested through explanation. This shifts the entire dynamic. Others begin to track your rhythms instead of assuming them. They adjust to you. Scarcity works because it implies choice. Choice implies self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency implies authority. This is not a tactic to make people chase. Chasing is incidental. The real change is internal. You stop orienting your schedule, mood, and energy around external cues. When you can be unavailable without anxiety, your nervous system settles. That calm is felt. People respond to what feels anchored. They withdraw from what feels desperate, even when desperation is hidden behind politeness. Scarcity is not absence. It is containment. You are present when present, absent without apology. This balance restores gravity. Attention does not respond to force. It responds to center. The blunt truth is this: whoever reacts is no longer leading. Reaction hands tempo to the outside. It makes your internal state contingent. That contingency is visible even when unspoken. Your old behavior was adjustment. You mirrored energy. You matched urgency. You softened when things cooled. Each reaction was an unconscious vote that the other side mattered more than your internal order. The new behavior is composure under non-response. You remain internally steady, whether acknowledged or not. No tightening. No compensating warmth. No emotional bargaining. This is not detachment. It is self-command. In physics, stable systems resist perturbation. They absorb shock without changing structure. Unstable systems oscillate wildly with minimal input. Most people live as oscillating systems. A message lifts them. Silence collapses them. When you stop reacting, something subtle happens. Others lose the ability to regulate you. They can no longer test, withdraw, or provoke to extract movement. That loss creates friction. They lean in, not because you demand attention, but because your lack of reaction removes their leverage. This is where authority actually forms. Not in dominance, in emotional immovability. You don't explain your calm. You don't defend it. You inhabit it. Reaction is noise. Composure is signal. This is the discipline most fail to develop because it offers no immediate relief. Only long-term command. None of this was about them. Not their responses. Not their attention. Not their behavior. That assumption is the final illusion. The principles you just absorbed don't give you control over people. They remove people from the control loop entirely. Power was never external. It was never something to extract, negotiate, or earn. It was the capacity to remain ordered when stimuli attempted to disorder you. Silence wasn't used to make others speak. It trained you to stop leaking urgency. Scarcity wasn't designed to provoke pursuit. It freed you from orienting around availability. Composure wasn't meant to dominate perception. It returned authorship of your internal state. This is why the effects feel indirect. Because they are. You didn't change outcomes. You changed inputs. When you no longer chase regulation through attention, attention becomes irrelevant. And paradoxically, relevance increases. This is the distinction most never make. They seek power as influence. They never realize power is insulation. An internally ordered person cannot be hurried, baited, or dismissed. There is nothing to pull on. Philosophers understood this long before psychology named it. The sovereign individual is not the one with followers. It is the one who cannot be destabilized. At this point, attention becomes background noise, useful when present, irrelevant when absent. That is control, not of others. Of self, the old version of you dies quietly, not in spectacle, not in announcement. It dies in micro-moments. Every time you leaned forward, every time you explained too much, every time you justified presence, every time you reacted before necessity. This accumulation of small surrenders formed a skin you no longer need, a skin of dependency, a skin of uncertainty, a skin of expectation. You burn it with awareness. The new version is not louder, not flashier, not performative. It is internal authority made visible through stillness. Presence becomes gravity. Absence becomes a signal. Need becomes neutralized. This rebirth is irreversible. Once the nervous system knows self-sufficiency, it cannot return to anxious orientation. Once scarcity and composure are embodied, the reflex to seek validation is gone. The old reflex dies in silence. You now occupy a different plane, where observation no longer dictates behavior, where attention is a byproduct, never a demand, where emotional equilibrium exists independent of external affirmation. Authority is no longer borrowed. It is intrinsic. You are a system unto yourself, one that calibrates around internal law, not external requests, one that carries weight without announcing it. This is not transformation by imitation. It is transformation by alignment. The old version has shed its skin. The new version stands quietly sovereign. Now there is a simple, deliberate act left, a marker of the new order within you. It is not flashy. It is not performative. It is symbolic, yet binding. Declare it, not to be noticed, not to seek approval, but to mark the internal shift as public, even if only to yourself. A word, a phrase, a single gesture that says, I am no longer governed by attention. I am not moved by absence or presence. I do not negotiate my value. I hold my center. This is your commitment to the new identity, a pledge to the sovereign self that you will not return to the old reflexes. Every glance, every message, every expectation that once controlled you now meets your composure. Every interaction becomes optional, measured, and unreactive. And know this, the next lesson awaits, deeper, darker, more precise, where subtlety sharpens authority. where invisibility becomes influence, where absence itself becomes leverage. For now, stand in the quiet authority you have earned. Let it settle in your body. Let it weigh on your presence. Let it stabilize your internal world. You are no longer the one who asks. You are the one who stands. And in standing, the world bends, whether it knows it or not. This is the full initiation. Your attention is now granted by none, yet observed by all.